From the outside, this house looked perfect, but inside, silence ruled like a tyrant. Not peace, not calm, silence. And one child was about to risk everything to break it. The story begins in a house that, from the outside, looks like any other. The walls are straight, the paint is faded but clean, the curtains are drawn neatly across the windows. Neighbors passing by would never imagine anything unusual happening behind those doors. If they were asked, they might even say this family seems respectable, quiet, maybe even ideal. But anyone who has lived inside knows the truth. What seems quiet from the outside is not peace, it is silence. And silence is not the same thing as peace. Silence here is a law, a weight, an invisible force that hangs in the air and tells everyone what they can and cannot do without ever needing to be spoken. Every day begins the same way. The father is already at the table by the time the others wake. The newspaper is open in his hands, though his eyes sometimes glaze over the words, as if he's more focused on being seen than on reading. The mother moves through the kitchen with practiced motions, the sound of water running into cups, the scrape of utensils against plates. She doesn't need to be told what to do. Years of repetition have carved these routines into her bones. The eldest child enters quietly, their movements efficient, almost adult-like, though they are still just a child. They collect their things, they help set the table, they speak only when necessary. The youngest comes running in with the energy of innocence, still too young to understand that their laughter is too loud for this house, that their questions are too bold, that their joy is something fragile here. And then there is the middle child, not the most obedient, not the most innocent, but the one who notices, the one who listens too closely to silences, who wonders why laughter always fades so quickly, who feels the weight pressing down more than the others admit. The father rarely raises his voice, but he doesn't have to. His silence is enough. A glance from him is enough to make the eldest freeze, to make the mother change direction, to make the youngest swallow their giggles. His silence is not gentle. It is sharp, it is heavy, it is absolute. It says, "Do not question me. Do not disrupt this order. Do not disturb the fragile balance I have built." The rules of the house are never spoken out loud, but everyone knows them. Do not ask about father's past. Do not linger too long on mother's sighs. Do not ask why we eat the same meals on the same days in the same way. Do not laugh too loudly. Do not speak unless spoken to. Above all, do not break the silence. The mother is a different story. She hums sometimes, little fragments of songs that trail off halfway through. She smiles, but the smiles never reach her eyes. She works constantly cleaning, cooking, folding, scrubbing, as though movement itself is a shield. When she stops moving, the silence becomes unbearable, so she doesn't stop. The children watch her sometimes, noticing the way her hands tighten when she hums, the way her eyes wander toward the window, as if looking for something that isn't there. But no one asks her what she's thinking. No one dares. The eldest has learned to carry burdens far too early. They remind the younger siblings of chores. They take on tasks without being asked. They speak in whispers, urging caution. Don't ask that. Don't laugh too loudly. Please, just stop before he notices. They believe they are protecting everyone, and in a way, they are. But the protection comes at a cost. They swallow their own voice so deeply that they hardly remember what it sounded like. They are always tired, their shoulders hunched, their face older than their years. The youngest doesn't yet understand. They laugh too freely, ask questions that make everyone tense. Why can't Dad smile more? Why does Mom always hum the same song? Why do we always eat this soup on Sundays? Their innocence is disarming, dangerous, because innocence doesn't recognize fear the way older children do. They push at the rules without realizing they are rules at all, and sometimes that tiny push is enough to shake everything. But it is the middle child who carries the spark. They see what others ignore. They hear the things that are never said. They feel the silence pressing down like a cage. They are afraid, yes, but also restless. They want to know why things are the way they are, and one Sunday they finally ask. The table is set, as always. Soup steaming in bowls, bread neatly sliced, father in his seat, mother serving in silence, eldest tense and ready to intervene, youngest fidgeting. The ritual has been performed so many times it feels unbreakable. The father lowers his paper, preparing to begin his usual talk about duty, about sacrifice, about the rules of life. But before he can, the middle child blurts out, "Why do we always do it like this? Why is it always the same every week?" The words are simple, almost innocent, but they land like thunder. The mother's hand trembles, the spoon clattering against the edge of the bowl. The eldest freezes, eyes darting toward the father in panic. The youngest tilts their head curiously, waiting for the answer. The father lowers his paper slowly, his eyes narrowing into sharp slits. The silence that follows is unbearable, stretching longer than it should, pressing heavier than the walls themselves. Finally, the mother speaks, her voice quick, too quick, because that's how it is. That's how it has always been. Her tone is sharp, final, but her voice cracks at the end. She tries to end the conversation, to shut it down before it can go further. And in the moment, it works. No one speaks again. The father lifts his paper, the eldest stares at their plate, the youngest shrugs and bites their bread. The meal continues. But the silence is not the same. It has cracked. That night, the middle child lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. They replay the moment again and again. The way the room froze, the way their mother's spoon shook, the way their father's silence felt heavier than ever, and instead of regret, they feel something else, something alive, a flicker of pride, a spark of courage, the realization that one question can change everything. Once you ask why, it doesn't leave you. It lingers, it grows, it multiplies. Why does father never laugh? Why does mother always hum songs she never finishes? Why does the eldest look so tired all the time? Why does the youngest's laughter fade so quickly? Why do we let silence decide everything? In the morning, the house looks the same. The father at the table, the mother in the kitchen, the eldest rushing quietly, the youngest running wild. But the middle child feels the difference in their chest. The silence is visible now. It has bars like a cage, and once you see them, you can't pretend they aren't there. At school, the difference is clearer still. Here, their voice is free. When they raise their hand, no one glares at them. When they laugh, no one silences them. A teacher even smiles and says, "You have a strong voice, don't lose it." Those words feel like light in the dark, something to hold on to when they step back into the house where silence rules. Don't lose it. They repeat it to themselves like a vow. But vows are dangerous things in a house like this. The father begins to sense the shift. He doesn't need words to notice. He watches more closely now. His silence is sharper, his commands stricter. He believes control will restore balance. The mother grows more restless, her humming more frantic, her hands moving faster. The eldest whispers desperate warnings. "Please, just stop. You're making it worse." The youngest giggles more boldly, copying their sibling, pushing boundaries in innocent ways. And the middle child feels both fear and strength tangled together. They've spoken once. They can't stop now. The following Sunday arrives heavy as ever, the soup, the bread, the ritual. The father begins his talk of duty, of sacrifice, the same words as always. But this time, the middle child interrupts again. Their voice trembles but does not break. Maybe happiness matters too. The mother gasps. The eldest stiffens. The youngest stares wide-eyed. The father's eyes blaze, his silence sharp as a blade. "You don't know what you're talking about," he growls. But the child does not look away. For the first time, they hold his gaze. The silence that follows is unbearable. But in that silence is something new. the proof that words can survive even here. That night, the child begins to write. They take out a notebook and pour everything onto the page. They write about duty and happiness, about silence and questions, about their mother's hums, their father's glare, their siblings' fear. They write until their hand aches, until the words blur. On paper, their voice is free. On paper, they are no longer trapped. The house is still heavy. The silence still rules. But it has been cracked. And once cracked, it can never truly mend. The week after that, Sunday does not move quickly. It drags, stretching long like a rope pulled too tight. On the surface, everything seems the same. The father still sits at his usual place at the table, the newspaper open before him. The mother still fills her day with endless movement. The eldest still tries to hold the house together. The youngest still bursts with questions and giggles. But beneath the surface, nothing is the same. Something has shifted, invisible but undeniable, and everyone can feel it. The middle child feels it most of all. Once you challenge silence, you cannot return to pretending it is harmless. Once you've cracked it, you begin to notice it everywhere. The sound of the spoon against a bowl is too loud because no one speaks to cover it. The creak of the floorboards echoes because there is no laughter to fill the space. Even the ticking of the clock on the wall seems sharper, reminding them of every second that passes in unspoken wait. The father's silence has changed. Before, it was unquestioned, heavy but accepted. Now, it feels brittle, as if he is holding it together with clenched fists. His eyes wander more often toward the middle child, his glares longer, sharper. He doesn't need to say, "I know what you did." His eyes say it for him. The silence that used to control now feels defensive, like a wall with cracks spreading through it. The mother moves faster these days, as though if she stays busy enough, she can sew the cracks back together. She scrubs already clean dishes. She folds clothes no one asked her to fold. She hums fragments of songs with no beginning or end. Sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, her face softens. Her lips part as though she wants to speak. But then the moment closes, and she swallows the words before they can escape. The eldest is the most unsettled. They watch their sibling with something between fear and envy. "Please," they whisper one night in the hallway, "don't make it worse." Their voice trembles. They are begging not because they believe silence is right, but because they cannot imagine life without it. To them, silence is survival, peace at any cost. They are tired, and the thought of more storms terrifies them. The youngest notices too. Innocence does not understand rules, but it feels tension. They giggle louder than before. They ask more questions. They mimic the middle child's courage without even realizing. "Why can't Dad smile?" they ask once, tilting their head. The room freezes. The father's eyes flash. The mother drops her spoon. The eldest hisses, "Shh," but the words have already been spoken, and in their simplicity, they are dangerous. The middle child feels fear, of course. They feel it in their chest whenever their father looks too long, whenever their mother flinches, whenever the eldest whispers warnings. But the fear is not enough to silence them anymore. Alongside it, there is pride, a small flame that flickers brighter every time they remember. They spoke, they survived, and the silence cracked. That pride is dangerous, but it is also the only thing keeping them from drowning in the weight of the house. At school, their world feels entirely different. There, voices flow freely. Questions are welcomed. Laughter bounces against walls without being crushed. A teacher praises them one day. "You speak with conviction. Don't lose that." The words echo in their chest like a secret blessing. For the first time, they realize their voice doesn't just belong to them. It can affect others. It can carry weight. It can mean something. And when they return home, the contrast cuts deeper. How can silence rule here when voices are valued everywhere else? One evening, while their father is out, the children gather in the kitchen. The mother chops vegetables, her knife tapping steadily against the board. The middle child dares to ask, "Mom, did you ever want something else? Before all this?" The question freezes her hands. For a long moment, she does not turn around. "This is life," she whispers finally. "You do what you must." But her voice is shaky, her words too quick. The middle child presses, softer now. "But did you want something else?" The mother closes her eyes. Her lips part, but before any truth can escape, she shakes her head and continues chopping. The moment is lost. But the child has seen it. The crack in her silence, too. That night, the middle child lies awake, staring at the ceiling. They realize the silence is not only their father's weapon, it is their mother's shield, it is their eldest sibling's burden, it is their youngest sibling's mystery. The silence does not belong to just one person. It belongs to all of them, passed down, obeyed, endured. And the weight of that realization burns, because if silence is a chain, someone must be the one to break it. The next Sunday arrives, heavy as always. The table is set, the soup steams, the bread is cut. The father begins his ritual, talk of duty, of sacrifice, of survival. His words are predictable, carved into stone after years of repetition. But the middle child feels the words like chains tightening, and before they can stop themselves, they speak. "But isn't life also about love? About happiness?" The words hang in the air like thunder. The mother's hand freezes mid-air, her eyes wide. The eldest's breath catches. The youngest leans forward, fascinated. The father's face hardens, his silence sharp as steel. "Happiness is weakness," he snaps finally. His voice is low, dangerous. The mother lowers her gaze. The eldest grips the edge of the table. The youngest frowns in confusion. The middle child feels their pulse hammering, but they do not look away. Their voice shakes but holds. "Happiness isn't weakness. It's what makes life worth living." The silence that follows is suffocating. The father's jaw clenches. His fists tremble against the table. For a moment, it seems he might erupt, shatter everything with one burst of rage. But instead, he says nothing. He stares, his silence roaring louder than any shout, but the child meets his eyes. For the first time, they do not look away. The meal continues in unbearable quiet, every bite tasting of fear and defiance. No one speaks, no one dares. But something irreversible has happened. The words have been spoken, and the silence could not erase them. That night, the middle child writes in their notebook until their hand aches. They write about happiness and weakness, about duty and love, about the way their father's silence shook, about the way their mother gasped, about the way their siblings froze. They write about the courage it takes to hold someone's gaze, even when your whole body is trembling. And with every word, the flame inside grows. Days pass. The father watches more closely, his silence is sharper. The mother hums more anxiously, her hands moving faster over chores. The eldest whispers sharper warnings, desperate to hold the fragile peace. The youngest pushes boundaries more boldly, their questions louder, their giggles freer. And the middle child, though afraid, feels unshakable. They know now that silence is not absolute. It is breakable, and once broken, it can never rule the same way again. The week drags on, each day charged with invisible tension. But the middle child knows they have only just begun. The days after that Sunday meal carry with them a strange heaviness, as though the walls themselves are aware of the tension building within them. From the outside, nothing seems different. The house still stands. The curtains are drawn the same way, the routines are followed with the same precision. But to those inside, especially the middle child, everything has shifted. Silence is no longer something invisible. It is a presence, a shadow in every room, a constant reminder that things have changed and cannot return to what they once were. The father seems even quieter than usual, though not because he is at peace. His silence has grown sharper, more dangerous, like a knife being held in waiting. He sits at the table as always, the newspaper stretched in front of him, but his eyes are not scanning the words. They are watching his wife, watching his children, and most of all, watching the one who dared to speak. His silence has lost its effortless control, and in its place is a silence that feels like a battle, as though every moment he is deciding whether to unleash what he is holding back. The mother's hands never stop moving. She cleans, she folds, she scrubs, she stirs, her body always in motion. But lately, that movement has an urgency to it, as if she is racing against something unseen. She hums more often, but the humming is broken, uneven, trailing off in the middle of notes. Once or twice, the middle child catches her staring out the window, her lips parting as if she is about to say something. But when their eyes meet, she turns away, her silence closing like a door. The eldest is caught between two worlds, torn by responsibility. They whisper warnings at every chance. Don't ask him anything. Don't push. Please, don't make it worse. Their voice trembles with desperation, not because they believe silence is right, but because they are terrified of what will happen if the fragile balance finally shatters. They are tired, carrying a weight far too heavy for their age, and the thought of losing even the little peace they have is unbearable. The youngest grows restless. Innocence does not understand rules, but it understands the tension that hangs in the air. They laugh at odd times, giggle when no one expects it, ask questions that make the room freeze. "Why do we always have to be quiet when Dad's home?" they ask one evening, their voice clear and bright. The eldest hisses at them to stop. The mother drops her spoon with a clatter. The father's glare is instant, sharp, but the damage is done. Even innocence has noticed, even innocence has begun to rebel. For the middle child, fear and courage now live side by side. They feel their heart pound whenever their father's eyes linger too long. They hear the sharpness in their mother's sighs. They feel the exhaustion in their eldest sibling's voice. But alongside that fear is something new: strength, a flame that flickers inside them, small but unshakable. They spoke once, they spoke twice, and they survived both times. That knowledge is enough to keep them standing. At school, the difference is even clearer. Here, their voice carries without punishment. They raise their hand without hesitation. They laugh without fear. They speak ideas that others hadn't dared to share. A teacher tells them one day, "You speak with conviction. Don't let anyone take that from you." The words are like a gift, like a secret they carry home in their heart. Among classmates, they are beginning to be seen differently, not just as another student, but as someone unafraid to speak. And the child realizes that their voice is not only a shield for themselves, it can also inspire others. That realization is powerful. One afternoon, while their father is away, the children sit together in the kitchen. The youngest tells a silly story about a game they played, their laughter echoing in the room. The eldest smiles faintly, though they try to hide it. The middle child asks the mother softly, "Did you ever want something else for yourself?" The mother freezes, knife in hand, her eyes locked on the vegetables before her. For a moment, it seems she might answer. Her lips part, her shoulders slump, but then she shakes her head and whispers, "This is life. You do what you must." Her voice cracks, betraying her. The middle child sees the truth behind the denial. There was a time when she wanted something else. There was a time when she had dreams, long buried beneath silence. That night, the middle child lies awake, thinking. They realize the silence has not only bound them, it has bound their mother, it has bound their eldest sibling, it has even bound their youngest, though innocence shields them for now. Silence is not just their father's weapon, it is everyone's cage, and if no one breaks it, the cage will hold them forever. The next Sunday arrives, heavier than the last. The family gathers as always, the table set with soup and bread, the ritual unfolding the same way. The father begins his talk of duty, of sacrifice, his voice sharp and final. But this time, the middle child interrupts again, their voice clear despite the fear in their chest. "If life is only duty," they say, "then what is the point of living at all?" The words hit the room like lightning. The mother gasps. The eldest grips the edge of the table. The youngest stares, wide-eyed, their mouth slightly open. The father slams his hand down on the table, the sound echoing like thunder. The bowls rattle, the bread shakes. His face is red, his silence sharper than ever. For a moment, it feels as though he will shatter everything with rage. But he does not speak, he does not erupt. He sits back, his silence holding, but no longer absolute. The meal continues in unbearable quiet. Every bite tastes of fear and defiance. But for the middle child, the moment is victory. They spoke, and the world did not end. Their words survived the silence. And once words survive, they cannot be erased. That night, they write in their notebook until their hand aches. They write about duty and happiness, about silence and defiance. They write about their mother's sorrow, their eldest sibling's burden, their youngest sibling's innocence. They write about their father's trembling fist against the table, and in their writing, they feel the truth solidify. Silence can be challenged, silence can be broken. And once broken, it can never rule the same way again. The following days stretch long, filled with tension. The father watches more closely, the mother sighs more often, the eldest whispers desperate warnings, the youngest pushes boundaries more boldly, and the middle child continues, steady, unshaken, carrying the flame inside them. The silence still roars, but it no longer owns them, and deep down, they know. This is only the beginning. The house has become a battlefield of silences. They clash in the air like invisible weapons, pressing on everyone's chest, making even the simplest moments heavy with unspoken tension. To someone passing by, everything looks as ordinary as ever. The father still takes his seat at the table with the newspaper. The mother still busies herself with chores. The eldest still carries responsibilities. The youngest still plays in bursts of innocent laughter. But to the middle child, every detail feels charged now. Every look is loaded. Every pause is deafening. Silence has always ruled this house, but now it feels desperate, fragile, like a kingdom on the verge of collapse. The father is the same and yet different. His silence has lost its calm control. Now it is sharp, suspicious, filled with cracks he cannot hide. He watches the family as though they are soldiers in his command, scanning each of them with his eyes. His glances linger longer on the middle child, as if daring them to speak again, as if waiting for rebellion. His silences stretch longer, his sighs heavier, his rules stricter. He is trying to restore order, but the harder he tries, the more obvious it becomes. He is afraid of losing it. The mother moves faster through her daily routine, as though she can outrun the tension. She folds clothes with too much force, stirs pots with unnecessary vigor, scrubs surfaces until they shine. Her humming is more frequent, but also more nervous, cutting off suddenly whenever footsteps approach. Sometimes she lingers by the window, her eyes distant, her face softening as if remembering something. But when the middle child catches her, she quickly turns away, her silence sealing the memory back inside. The eldest feels the strain more than anyone. They whisper warnings in hallways, in bedrooms, in hurried moments between chores. "Please stop. You don't understand. If you push too hard, he'll break. And if he breaks, we all pay." Their words come quickly, urgently, filled with fear. They are not siding with the father, but with survival. They are the glue holding the fragile balance together, and they are terrified that if the silence shatters completely, everything will collapse. Their body shows the weight of it: tired eyes, slumped shoulders, quiet sighs that escape when they think no one hears. The youngest, meanwhile, becomes braver in ways no one expects. They laugh louder, they sing to themselves, they copy the middle child's defiance in innocent ways. They do not know the danger of rebellion, not fully. To them, it is play, a game of testing limits. But even their small acts, a giggle at the wrong moment, a question asked too boldly, are enough to shift the air. The father scolds, but his scolding lacks force now. The silence no longer terrifies as it once did. For the middle child, the world feels divided in two. At school, their voice flows freely, met with nods, with smiles, with encouragement. Teachers tell them they are thoughtful, brave, articulate. Friends admire them, some even follow their lead. It is in school that they discover the true power of their voice, that it can reach others, inspire them, change them. But at home, the same voice is treated as dangerous, threatening, disruptive, and the contrast makes the silence even harder to bear. Once you've known freedom, returning to chains feels unbearable. One evening, the family sits at dinner. The father commands silence with his presence, as always. The mother moves carefully, the eldest watches tensely, the youngest fidgets. The middle child studies their father closely, wondering who he really is beneath the silence. They remember the old notebook they found in the attic, the faded words written by a younger man who dreamed, who hoped, who once had a voice. They imagine that man sitting across from them now, trapped behind the mask of silence. And for the first time, they feel not only anger, but pity. Perhaps the father, too, is a prisoner of silence. Perhaps he never learned another way. That thought stays with them through the night. Lying in bed, they whisper to themselves, "He is afraid, too." They write it down in their notebook, filling pages with words about fear disguised as control, about silence hiding sorrow. They realize that rebellion is not just for themselves. It is for their siblings, their mother, maybe even for their father. Because if silence has cost them all so much, then breaking it could set them all free. The next Sunday arrives, as heavy as always. The soup steams, the bread is sliced, the father begins his sermon on duty and sacrifice. His voice is sharp, his words final. But the middle child interrupts again, steady this time. "We have duty, yes, but don't we deserve happiness too?" The father slams his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. The mother gasps, the eldest freezes, the youngest stares with wide eyes. But the child does not look away. Their voice shakes, but holds. If we only live for duty, then what is the point of living at all? The silence that follows is unbearable. The father's glare burns, his fists tremble, his silence roars, but he says nothing. He cannot erase the words. The family sits in the thick of it, each of them feeling the shift, even if they cannot admit it. The meal continues, but everyone knows nothing is the same anymore. That night, the middle child writes with a frenzy. They write about duty and happiness, about fear and courage, about silence and voice. They write about their father's trembling hands, their mother's sorrowful eyes, their siblings' quiet confusion. They write about themselves, not as a victim, not as a rebel, but as someone who refuses to disappear. Their words spill onto the page, building a world where laughter is not forbidden, where silence is a choice, not a law. The eldest grows restless. One night, they confront the middle child, their voice low but urgent. "You don't understand what you're doing. You think you're brave, but you're putting us all at risk." He's going to snap. The middle child answers calmly. "He already snapped long ago. We're just the ones finally seeing it." The eldest stares at them, wounded by the truth. They turn away, unable to argue, unable to agree. Their silence says everything. The mother begins to shift too. She scolds less, listens more. She lets the youngest laugh longer. She doesn't hush the middle child as quickly. She allows herself small smiles when she thinks no one is looking. One night, while folding clothes, she whispers to the middle child, "Don't give up your voice. I lost mine long ago." The words are faint, fragile, but they feel like a torch passed quietly in the dark. The father notices these changes. He tries to tighten control, stricter commands, longer silences, sharper punishments, but it is not working the same way anymore. His silence no longer silences. His control no longer controls. The more he grips, the more the family resists. One night, at the dinner table, the youngest laughs too loudly. The father scolds harshly, but before fear can settle, the middle child speaks firmly. "They're just laughing. It's not wrong to laugh." The father slams his hand on the table, but the middle child does not look away. The eldest stares in shock. The mother freezes. The youngest holds their breath. For a long moment, the air feels ready to shatter. But then, the father sits back in silence. He says nothing more. And in that silence, there is victory. The middle child writes again that night, their notebook filling with words. He sat back. He said nothing. We are stronger than silence now. They write until their hand aches, until their heart feels lighter, because they know the truth. The silence is losing. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably, it is losing. The family is changing, even if they cannot say it out loud. The silence is still there, but it no longer owns them. It no longer defines them. And the middle child knows, with every beat of their heart, that the fight has only just begun. The weeks after that last Sunday unfold slowly, every day dragging under the weight of what has been spoken and what has been left unsaid. Outwardly, the house looks unchanged. The curtains still hang in their place, the floors still creak in familiar spots, the meals are served at the same times. But inside, everyone feels the difference. It is as if the air itself has thickened, pressing down on each of them, reminding them with every breath that silence has been broken and cannot be glued back together as it was before. The father sits in his chair as always, the newspaper before him, his expression hard and unreadable. But if anyone looks closely, they notice how often his eyes wander off the page. He watches his children with suspicion, as though waiting for another spark, another question, another challenge. His silence is heavier now, but it no longer feels like power. It feels like armor, cracked and dented, something he is holding desperately around himself because he cannot risk what happens if he lets it fall. The mother moves through her chores with the same steady rhythm, but she has begun to change in small ways. She no longer cuts off her humming so quickly. Sometimes she lets the tune linger just a little longer, just enough for the children to hear that she once loved music. When her youngest bursts out laughing, she no longer hushes them instantly. When the middle child asks questions, she doesn't always silence them. She still fears the father's silence, still lives in its shadow, but she is beginning to resist in the smallest of ways. The eldest struggles most of all. They feel caught in the middle, torn between the urge to keep the fragile peace and the pull of something new rising in the family. Their warnings grow sharper. You don't understand how dangerous this is. You'll ruin everything. But there is doubt in their voice now. Their eyes reveal something they cannot admit: envy. They wish they could be as brave as their sibling. They wish they could speak as openly. But years of carrying the burden have weighed them down too much, and survival is all they know. The youngest grows bolder with every passing day. They laugh louder, they ask questions more freely, they mimic the middle child's defiance in ways that seem playful but carry meaning. They are too young to understand the danger fully, but innocence has its own power. Their joy becomes another crack in the silence, a reminder that laughter cannot be killed completely. For the middle child, fear and courage walk side by side. They feel their heart pound each time their father's glare lingers, but alongside the fear is a thrill, the knowledge that their voice has power. They write in their notebook every night, pouring out thoughts they cannot say aloud, building a world of words where silence cannot follow them. And with each page, their conviction deepens. They are not only fighting for themselves, they are fighting for all of them. At school, they blossom. Their voice is stronger than ever, their presence undeniable. They answer questions quickly, argue points with teachers, defend classmates who falter. Their words ripple outward, inspiring others to speak. Friends tease them for always speaking up, but beneath the teasing is admiration. A teacher tells them, "You have a gift, don't let anyone take it from you." The words echo in their chest like a promise. Back at home, the father notices. His silence grows sharper, his commands harsher. He tries to restore order with stricter rules, with sharper punishments, with longer stretches of silence. But the more he grips, the more resistance grows. His silence no longer commands instant obedience. His children's eyes no longer drop so quickly. Their voices no longer falter so easily. Even his wife no longer enforces his rules as strictly as before. Control is slipping. One evening during dinner, the youngest laughs too loudly. The father snaps, his hand slamming down on the table. But before fear can settle, the middle child speaks. "They're only laughing," they say firmly. "It's not wrong to laugh." The father's face reddens, his silence burning. But the middle child does not look away. The eldest stares in shock, the mother freezes, the youngest's eyes widen. For a moment, it feels like the room might shatter. But then, the father sits back and says nothing. His silence roars, but it is no longer victorious. That night, the middle child writes furiously in their notebook. "He sat back. He didn't silence me. We are stronger now." They fill pages with words about fear, about strength, about how silence, once cracked, can never hold in the same way again. The eldest corners them later that week. Their voice is urgent, trembling. "You're pushing too far. He'll break, and if he does, we'll all suffer." The middle child meets their gaze calmly. "He already broke long ago. We're just the ones finally seeing it." The eldest flinches, hurt by the truth. They turn away, unable to argue, unable to agree. Their silence says everything. The mother changes too. Late one night, while folding clothes, she whispers, "Don't stop speaking. I stopped a long time ago, and I regret it every day." Her voice trembles, but her eyes shine with something fierce. It is a rare admission, a torch passed quietly in the dark. The father feels the changes and fights harder. His silences grow longer, his commands sharper. But each time he tries to tighten control, he sees the cracks widening. He cannot erase the sound of his wife's hums, the giggles of his youngest, the quiet sighs of his eldest, the unwavering voice of his middle child. The next Sunday meal arrives heavy with expectation. The father begins his usual sermon about duty and sacrifice, but this time the middle child interrupts not with defiance, but with a story. They tell of something that happened at school, laughter, teamwork, the joy of being heard. Their voice is steady, their story bright. The father glares, his silence sharp, but the child continues until the end. The mother listens quietly, her eyes glistening. The eldest hides a smile. The youngest claps their hands. For once, the silence cannot swallow the sound. The father says nothing. His silence is not victory, it is retreat. That night, the middle child writes one final line before sleep. The silence is not forever, and for the first time they believe it completely. The house breathes uneasily now, as if every wall, every floorboard, every piece of furniture knows that something has shifted. Routines still continue, yes, but they no longer feel unshakable. The father still claims his seat each morning, the newspaper open in his hands, his silence thick as smoke. The mother still moves in her endless rhythm of work, her hands never stopping, her hums rising and falling like waves. The eldest still shoulders too much, carrying burdens that make them seem older than they are. The youngest still plays and laughs, too bold for a place built on silence. And the middle child, they stand at the center of it all, both frightened and unyielding, carrying the flame they lit the day they spoke. The father senses the flame and fears it. He does not say so, of course. He says nothing at all. But his silences have changed. They are no longer calm and commanding. They are jagged, brittle, strained. He sharpens the rules, imposes stricter orders, tries to enforce the old order through heavier glares, longer pauses, sharper sighs. But his silence no longer carries the same absolute authority. He can feel it slipping through his fingers, and the more he feels it, the tighter he grips. The mother begins to reveal herself in small ways. She still moves quickly, still hides her feelings behind endless tasks, but sometimes she stops. Sometimes she lingers at the table after a meal. Sometimes she lets her humming turn into real melody. Sometimes she lets her children see the softness in her eyes. One night, while folding clothes with the middle child nearby, she whispers, "I once thought life would be different." Her voice is barely audible, more breath than sound, but the middle child hears every word. They want to ask what she means, but her lips close quickly, and she shakes her head as if swallowing back the truth. Even so, the child knows. She remembers dreams she cannot speak aloud. The eldest is restless, pulled between loyalty to silence and longing for freedom. They scold the middle child often, their words urgent, desperate. "Don't you see what you're doing? You're going to push him too far." But late at night, when no one else is around, their voice softens. "I wish I could be like you," they admit once, their eyes wet with tears they try to hide. The middle child answers quietly, "You already are. You just don't see it yet." The eldest looks away, unable to believe, but the words plant themselves like seeds. The youngest grows braver by the day. Their laughter is louder, their questions sharper, their innocence unafraid. They ask why the family never laughs together, why father never smiles, why mother always hums the same tune. Their questions sting because they are simple, because they are true, because they pierce the silence in ways no rebellion could. Even the father cannot stop their words entirely. He scolds, yes, but the questions linger, unerasable. For the middle child, fear is constant, but so is strength. They walk through the house with their head higher, their eyes steady, their heart pounding but firm. They write in their notebook every night, filling page after page with thoughts, questions, truths. They write about silence as if it were a living creature, a beast that stalks their family. They write about courage as if it were light, flickering but unstoppable. They write about love, about laughter, about happiness, about the possibility that life can be more than endurance. Their notebook becomes a world of freedom, a world where their voice cannot be silenced. At school they flourish. Their hand shoots up first in class, their voice rings clearly, their laughter flows without fear. Teachers nod approvingly, some cautioning them to temper their boldness, others encouraging them to keep it. Friends begin to admire them, not just for their words, but for the way they carry themselves, unshaken. One teacher tells them, "Your voice matters, remember that." The words lodge in their chest, like a promise. Back at home, the father feels the shift. His silences grow longer, his commands more biting, but even he knows the truth. His grip is slipping. His eldest no longer rushes to enforce his rules. His wife no longer silences the children as quickly. His youngest no longer obeys without question. And his middle child, their eyes no longer lower, their voice no longer falters. The silence is losing. One evening, as the family sits at dinner, the youngest laughs loudly. The father snaps, his fist slamming the table. But before fear can settle, the middle child speaks calmly. "They're just laughing. It's not wrong to laugh." The father's glare burns, his silence roars, but the middle child does not look away. The eldest stares in shock, the mother's hands freeze, the youngest's eyes widen. For a long, unbearable moment, the air feels like it will shatter. But then the father sits back, his silence loud but defeated. He says nothing more. That night, the middle child writes with trembling hands. "He sat back. He did not silence me. Silence is losing." They fill pages with words, their heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. Because for the first time, They know it is true. The eldest confronts them again later that week. "You don't understand," they whisper, their voice cracking. "If you keep pushing, everything will break." The middle child answers quietly, "It's already broken. We're just finally admitting it." The words sting, but they are true. The eldest turns away, silent tears in their eyes. The mother begins to shift more openly. She listens to her children's stories longer. She lets herself smile when they laugh. She even hums melodies that sound like real songs. "Once," she whispers to the middle child, "don't stop. I gave up my voice long ago, but you still have yours. Don't let it go." Her words feel like a blessing, a torch passed into waiting hands. The father feels it too, though he never admits it. His silence trembles at the edges, his rules no longer followed with absolute obedience. He tries to reassert control, but each attempt makes the cracks more visible. Even he cannot deny it. The silence no longer owns this house completely. The next Sunday comes, and the air is heavy with anticipation. The soup steams, the bread is sliced. The father sits with his silence like armor. He begins his ritual talk of duty, sacrifice, survival. But before his words can settle, the middle child interrupts with a story. They speak of school, of laughter, of a moment when voices worked together and joy was shared. Their story is bright, their voice steady. The father glares, but the child does not stop. The mother listens with quiet tears. The eldest hides a small smile. The youngest claps their hands. The silence roars, but it cannot erase the sound. The father says nothing. His silence is no longer command. It is retreat. That night, the middle child lies awake, whispering to themselves, "We are changing. Slowly, painfully, but we are changing." And for the first time, the words feel less like hope and more like truth. The days after that last Sunday meal pass with a tension that no one dares to name, but everyone feels. The house is still filled with the same routines, the same movements, the same silences. Yet something has changed irreversibly. Silence is no longer absolute. It has been cracked too many times, and once a crack appears, it can never be undone. It spreads, it grows, it makes the strongest walls fragile. The father still sits at his table with the newspaper each morning, his silence wrapped around him like a cloak. But that silence no longer feels like certainty. It feels like defense. His glances are sharper, his commands more sudden, his pauses longer. He is trying harder than ever to maintain the order that once came so easily. But his family is slipping from his control, and though he would never say it, he knows it. He can see it in their eyes, in their small rebellions, in their refusal to bow as quickly as they once did. The mother, too, has shifted. She continues her endless rhythm, washing, cleaning, cooking, but her hands are less frantic, her hums longer, steadier. Sometimes she even allows herself to sing a full verse before cutting it off. When her children speak, she listens more openly. When they laugh, she doesn't hush them so quickly. And once, while peeling potatoes, she whispers to herself, almost too softly to hear, "Maybe this house will be different one day." The middle child hears, though they pretend not to. Those words live inside them like fire. The eldest feels the shift with every breath. They still warn the middle child, still beg them to stop. "You're tearing him apart. You don't know what he'll do if you keep this up." Their fear is real, heavy, born from years of being the peacemaker. But even their warnings have changed. There is less conviction in their words now, more hesitation. Sometimes, when the middle child speaks boldly, the eldest lowers their eyes, but cannot hide the faint trace of a smile. They are afraid, yes, but somewhere deep inside, they long for the same freedom. The youngest grows fearless. Their innocence is no longer only innocence. It has become rebellion of its own kind. They laugh loudly, sing off-key songs, ask blunt questions without shame. "Why do we have to eat in silence? Why doesn't Dad ever tell us stories? Why does Mom always hum sad songs? Their questions are sharp, not because they are clever, but because they are true. And truth, spoken innocently, is harder to silence than defiance. Even when the father scolds, the words linger. Everyone hears them, everyone feels them. The middle child carries all of this inside them. Fear is still there, the fear of their father's glare, the fear of punishment, the fear of what could happen if everything breaks. But alongside fear is strength, unshakable now. Each time they spoke, they survived. Each time they resisted, they grew stronger. Each word spoken became a seed, and those seeds are growing into something larger than themselves. At school, they thrive more than ever. Their hand is always raised, their voice is steady, their laughter unafraid. Teachers admire their confidence, though some caution them to be careful. Friends tease them for always speaking up, but behind the teasing is admiration. One friend whispers once, "I wish I was like you. I wish I wasn't so afraid." The middle child smiles, but inside they think, "I'm afraid too. I just don't let it win." One evening, after the father leaves the table in frustration, the siblings sit together in their room. The youngest whispers, "Do you think he'll ever change?" The eldest shakes their head, their eyes tired. People like him don't change. But the middle child answers differently. He already has. He just doesn't want us to see it. The eldest frowns, unconvinced, but the youngest grins. Then we'll keep making him change, and in their innocent certainty, there is truth. The mother begins to confide more. One night, she tells a fragment of her past. She speaks of a time when she used to sing in the village, when her voice filled small gatherings with warmth. "I thought I'd always sing," she says softly, her hands twisting in her lap. But then life. She trails off, her eyes lowering, her words swallowed by silence. The middle child looks at her, seeing not just their mother, but the woman she once was, the woman she could have been. "You can still sing," they whisper. The mother shakes her head quickly, but her eyes glisten. She wants to believe. The father notices these changes and grows harsher. His silences stretch long, his fists tighten against the table, his commands snap like whips. But his control is brittle. He sees his wife humming, his eldest sighing less, his youngest laughing more, his middle child staring back at him without fear. He feels the ground shifting beneath him, though he will never admit it. One Sunday, the silence at the table feels unbearable. The father begins his ritual about duty, his voice sharp. But before he can finish, the youngest blurts out, "Why can't we ever just laugh together?" The words strike like lightning. The mother gasps. The eldest pales. The middle child sits straighter. The father slams his hand down on the table, the sound thunderous. The youngest jumps, their eyes wide. But before silence can swallow them, the middle child speaks firmly, "Because you won't let us. But we're going to laugh anyway." The father's face burns red, his silence seething. For a moment, it seems he will explode, but he does not. He stares, trembling, then slowly sits back. He says nothing more. The silence is loud, but it is broken. That night, the mother tucks the youngest into bed with shaking hands. The eldest lingers in the hallway, torn between fear and relief. The middle child writes furiously in their notebook, "We spoke." He looked away. He cannot stop us anymore. Their hand aches, their eyes blur, but their heart is steady. Days pass, filled with tension, but also with something else, hope. The mother hums openly now, sometimes even smiling when her children laugh. The eldest, though still afraid, begins to relax, their warnings softer, their laughter freer. The youngest continues to test boundaries, their joy untamed. And the middle child stands firm, their voice no longer trembling, their courage no longer hidden. The father remains the same and yet different. His silence still roars, but it no longer commands. His presence is still heavy, but it no longer crushes. He feels the shift, though he fights against it, and deep down, perhaps, he knows the silence has lost its crown. The middle child lies awake one night, staring at the ceiling. They whisper to themselves, "We are not trapped forever. We will laugh together, one day." And for the first time, they believe it. The house feels different now, though the routines remain the same. From the outside, it is still the same quiet place, the curtains drawn neatly, the garden trimmed, the windows closed, but inside, the silence has changed. It is still there, thick and heavy, but it is no longer absolute. It has been challenged too many times, pierced by too many words, cracked by too much laughter to ever be whole again. The father notices it most. He sits at the table every morning, his newspaper open, his silence wrapped around him like armor. But it is no longer unshakable. His silence now feels like a wall that has been battered, still standing but covered in fractures. His glances at the children are sharper, lingering too long, as if daring them to speak. His rules are stricter, his commands harsher, but they no longer carry the same authority. He knows control is slipping, and he despises it, but he cannot stop it. The mother moves with more calm now. Her hums are not as broken as before. Sometimes she lets herself finish a song, her voice soft but steady. She listens more when her children speak. She even tells small stories, fragments of who she used to be, fragments of dreams she once carried. When the youngest laughs, she lets it linger. When the middle child asks questions, she doesn't always silence them. She is still careful, still afraid, but in her eyes there is a light that was not there before. The eldest is slowly beginning to change as well. They still whisper warnings, still beg for caution, but their tone has softened. The certainty is gone. They no longer believe silence is the only way to survive. Sometimes they allow themselves to laugh quietly at the youngest's antics. Sometimes they look at the middle child with something close to admiration. They are not ready to rebel themselves, but they no longer deny the possibility that things could be different. The youngest has become fearless. Their innocence, once fragile, is now a weapon. They ask bold questions that no one else dares to ask. Why doesn't Dad tell us what he dreams about? Why do we never eat and talk at the same time? Why do we all look so sad? Their questions sting, not because they are cruel, but because they are simple truths. Even the father cannot silence them completely. He scolds, yes, but the words hang in the air long after his silence returns. For the middle child, the tension is constant, but so is their determination. Fear still lives inside them, the fear of their father's glare, the fear of punishment, the fear of being crushed. But alongside the fear is an unshakable strength. They know their voice matters now. They know silence can be broken. Each night they write in their notebook until their hand aches. They write about their siblings, about their mother, about their father. They write about silence as if it were an enemy to be fought, and about courage as if it were the only weapon worth carrying. They write about a future where their family can laugh together, a future where no one is afraid to speak. At school, they thrive. Their voice is confident, their laughter bold, their presence undeniable. Teachers encourage them, friends follow their lead. They discover that their words have power not only to protect themselves, but to inspire others. One day, after they defend a classmate, a teacher says quietly, "You will do great things one day. Don't let anyone silence you." The words lodge deep in their chest, a promise they intend to keep. The father, of course, feels the shift. His silences grow longer, his fists tighter, his presence heavier. He tries to restore control, but it no longer works. His eldest no longer rushes to enforce his rules. His wife no longer silences the children quickly. His youngest no longer obeys without question. And his middle child, their eyes no longer lower, their voice no longer trembles. The silence is slipping away from him, and though he will never say it, he knows it. One Sunday, the ritual begins as always. The soup steams, the bread is sliced, the father sits in his place. He begins his usual talk about duty, sacrifice, survival, but before he can finish, the middle child interrupts, not with defiance this time, but with a story. They speak about school, about laughter, about voices working together. Their story is bright, their voice steady. The father glares, his silence sharp, but the child continues. The mother listens, her eyes glistening. The eldest lowers their gaze, hiding a faint smile. The youngest claps and laughs. For once, the silence cannot swallow the sound. The father says nothing. His silence is not victory. It is retreat. That night, the middle child writes, "He said nothing. He looked away. Silence is weaker than it seems." The words flow across the page, filling it with truth. The silence is still heavy, but it no longer feels invincible. It feels tired, cracked, on the verge of breaking completely. In the days that follow, the family begins to move differently. The mother hums openly. The eldest sighs less and smiles more. The youngest sings loudly, daring anyone to hush them. And the middle child continues to speak, steady and unafraid. The silence lingers, yes, but it no longer owns the house. The father feels it most of all. His silences are longer, his eyes sharper, his commands harsher. But deep down, he knows the truth. His reign is ending. The silence is no longer a crown. It is a crumbling wall. The middle child lies awake one night, staring at the ceiling. They whisper to themselves, "We are changing, slowly, painfully, but we are changing." And this time, the words feel like prophecy. The silence in the house has weakened, but it has not vanished. It lingers like a ghost, haunting the corners of rooms, settling in the pauses between words, wrapping itself around the father like a second skin. Yet for the first time, the silence feels tired, like an old ruler clinging to power, aware that its days are numbered. Everyone in the family senses it, even if they do not say so. The air is charged with something new, not just fear, but possibility. The father still clings to his throne at the table, the newspaper spread before him, his face stern and unyielding. His silence is brittle now, like glass ready to shatter. He watches his children more closely than ever. He hears the faint hums of his wife, the quiet sighs of his eldest, the unrestrained giggles of his youngest, the steady words of his middle child. He feels the walls closing in, though he does not understand that the walls are his own. His silence no longer commands obedience. It only provokes resistance. The mother continues her routines, but there is softness in her movements now. She no longer rushes to cover her humming. Sometimes she lets herself sing a whole verse. Sometimes she allows herself to laugh at something the youngest says. Her eyes are still wary, still cautious, but they shine with something new hope. She listens when her children speak, and in her silence now there is not suppression, but solidarity. The eldest remains conflicted, their shoulders heavy with years of carrying peace that was never truly peace. They still whisper warnings, still beg for caution, but their voice lacks conviction. Sometimes they let themselves smile, quietly, at the youngest's boldness or the middle child's defiance. Sometimes, when no one is watching, they even laugh softly, as though remembering what it feels like. They are afraid, but they are beginning to see that fear is not the only way to live. The youngest has become a force of nature. They ask questions freely, laugh loudly, sing without shame. Their innocence is a rebellion all its own, unafraid of consequences because they do not fully understand them. Why can't Dad ever say he loves us? They ask one day. The room freezes. The mother gasps, the eldest turns pale, the middle child stares straight ahead, and the father slams his paper down on the table, his silence shaking. He does not answer. He cannot answer. The question is too true, too piercing, too undeniable. The middle child feels the weight of every moment. They are afraid, still afraid of the father's glares, afraid of what punishment might come. But courage has rooted itself deep inside them. Their voice no longer trembles when they speak. They look their father in the eye. They write every night in their notebook, pouring out the truths that cannot be spoken aloud. They fill pages with words about silence and courage, about duty and love, about laughter and freedom. Their notebook has become their sanctuary, their record, their proof that their voice exists and that it matters. At school, they are unstoppable. Teachers praise their boldness, classmates admire them. They speak with conviction, defend others, ask questions no one else dares to ask. One teacher tells them, "Voices like yours change the world." The words echo in their heart. They know their world is smaller, confined within the walls of their home, but they also know even small worlds can be changed. The father grows harsher, desperate to hold on. His silences stretch long, his glares sharper, his fists trembling against the table. He feels the family slipping, and it terrifies him. He cannot admit it, but he knows it. He sees it in his wife's softened eyes, in his eldest's hidden smiles, in his youngest's bold questions, in his middle child's unwavering stare. His silence no longer controls, it only reveals his fear. One Sunday, the ritual meal begins as always. The soup steams, the bread is sliced, the father sits in his place, the family around him. He begins his talk about duty, his voice sharp, insistent. But before he can finish, the middle child interrupts. "Duty is important," they say calmly, "but love is more. Without love, duty is just chains." The words cut through the air like a blade. The mother's eyes widen, the eldest's breath catches, the youngest grins with delight. The father slams his hand on the table, the bowls rattling, the bread scattering. His silence roars, his face burns. But the middle child does not look away. They hold his gaze, steady, unflinching. For a long, unbearable moment, it feels as though the world will explode. But it does not. The father sits back, trembling, his silence heavy but powerless. He says nothing more. That night, the mother lingers in the kitchen with the middle child. She whispers, "I don't know where you find the strength." The child answers softly, "From you. You had it once. You still do." The mother's eyes glisten, her lips tremble, but she cannot respond. Her silence is not denial. It is grief. It is memory. It is longing. The eldest comes to the middle child's room that night, their voice low. "You're changing things," they whisper. "I can feel it. I just don't know if it's safe." The middle child answers firmly, "Safe doesn't matter if we're never free." The eldest looks at them, torn, then nods faintly. It is the first time they have not argued. The youngest crawls into the middle child's bed that night, giggling. "You made him quiet," they whisper with pride. "You're not afraid." The middle child smiles sadly. "I am afraid," they confess, "but I speak anyway." The youngest nods solemnly, as if understanding. "Then I will too." The father lies awake in his room that night, staring at the ceiling. His silence is louder than ever, pressing on him, suffocating him. For the first time, perhaps, he feels it not as power but as prison. But he cannot let go. He does not know how. The middle child fills their notebook with words. He sat back. He said nothing. Silence is losing. We are winning. Their hand aches, their heart pounds, but they write until the page is full. The days that follow are uneasy, filled with small rebellions and long silences. The mother hums more openly. The eldest sighs less and smiles more. The youngest laughs freely, their questions bold. The middle child stands steady, their voice calm and strong. The silence still lingers, but it no longer reigns. It is fading, retreating, breaking piece by piece, and deep down, everyone knows it. The end of silence is near. The house is no longer the same. It looks unchanged from the outside, the curtains still drawn, the walls still upright, the room still filled with familiar furniture, but inside, the silence has lost its throne. It lingers, yes, but it no longer rules. It is a shadow now, not a crown. It still creeps into moments, still tries to settle in the air, still waits for someone to falter. But too many voices have been spoken, too many questions have been asked, too much laughter has broken through. Silence can no longer hold absolute power. The father feels it most. He sits at the table each morning with his newspaper, his silence wrapped around him like armor. But it is no longer the silence of a king. It is the silence of a man trying to hold together a crumbling wall. His glances are sharper, his pauses longer, his hands tremble against the pages of the paper he pretends to read. He knows, deep down, that the silence is slipping, and he fears what comes after. He is a man who only knows silence, who only knows control. Without it, he does not know who he is. The mother is freer now than she has been in years. She hums openly, sometimes even singing whole verses, her voice trembling but real. She listens when her children speak. She smiles more often. She lets herself laugh softly when something is truly funny. She is not entirely free. Fear is still in her eyes, caution still in her movements, but she has begun to reclaim parts of herself long buried under silence. And in doing so, she has given her children something priceless: permission. Permission to speak, to laugh, to live. The eldest has changed too. They no longer scold the middle child as fiercely. They still worry, still whisper warnings sometimes, but more often they listen. Sometimes they even join in. Once, when the youngest laughed too loudly at dinner, the eldest smiled instead of shushing them. Once, when the middle child asked a bold question, the eldest nodded instead of protesting. They are still afraid, but their fear no longer owns them. They are beginning to believe that another way is possible. The youngest is uncontainable now. Their laughter echoes through the halls. Their questions flow without restraint. They ask the things no one else dares to ask. Why don't we eat together happily? Why doesn't Dad smile more? Why can't we sing while we work? Their innocence has become a rebellion so pure that even the father cannot crush it. He scolds, he glares, he slams his hand on the table, but the questions linger, unerasable, and the youngest, undeterred, continues to ask. And the middle child, they are the center of it all. Fear still lives in their chest, yes, but it no longer dictates their actions. Their voice is steady now, their courage unshakable. They speak at the table, they defend their siblings, they look their father in the eye without trembling. Every night, they fill their notebook with words, thoughts, questions, memories, dreams. Their notebook has become the record of their rebellion, the proof of their voice. And with every page, they carve out a future where silence will not rule. At school, their reputation has grown. Teachers admire their confidence. Classmates respect their boldness. They are the one who speaks when others are silent, who defends when others retreat, who asks when others are afraid. They begin to understand that their voice is not just for themselves. It can change others. It can inspire. It can create ripples far beyond the walls of their house. One Sunday, the silence faces its greatest test. The family sits at the table, the soup steaming, the bread sliced. The father begins his usual speech about duty, his voice sharp, insistent, almost desperate now. He is holding on to the only weapon he knows. But before he can finish, the middle child interrupts. Their voice is calm, steady, clear. Duty matters, but love matters more. Without love, duty is nothing but chains. The room freezes. The mother's eyes fill with tears. The eldest lowers their gaze but cannot hide the faint smile tugging at their lips. The youngest claps their hands, laughing with delight. And the father slams his hand down on the table, his silence roaring, his face red with fury. For a moment, it seems he will erupt, that the walls will crumble in violence, but then he stops. He breathes heavily, trembling. He looks at his child, at the eyes that do not lower, at the voice that does not falter. And he sits back. He says nothing. For the first time, his silence does not crush. It retreats. The family eats in quiet, but it is not the same silence as before. It is not his silence. It is theirs. That night, the mother sits with her children in the kitchen. She hums a melody, her voice soft, and this time she finishes the song. The youngest claps. The eldest smiles faintly. The middle child writes it down in their notebook. She sang again. The father lingers in his chair alone, his silence thick around him, but for the first time, perhaps, he feels it not as power, but as loneliness. His silence no longer holds the room. It only holds him. In the weeks that follow, the house changes further. The mother sings more often. The eldest begins to laugh with their siblings. The youngest continues to fill the house with questions and joy, and the middle child speaks, always steady, always strong. The silence still lingers, but it no longer defines them. It no longer rules. The father resists, but even he knows the truth. His silence is no longer the crown of the house. It is a relic, fading, powerless against voices that will not be silenced. Sometimes he slams his hand down, sometimes he glares, sometimes he retreats into longer stretches of silence. But it does not matter. The silence is broken, and once broken, it can never rule again. One evening, the family eats together, and the youngest bursts out laughing. The mother joins, her laughter soft but real. The eldest allows themselves to chuckle, shaking their head. The middle child laughs too, freely, their voice bright. The father stares, his face tight, but then just for a moment his lips twitch, as though remembering how to smile. He hides it quickly, retreating back into silence, but the middle child sees it, and they write it down that night. Even he almost laughed. The notebook is nearly full now, its pages crowded with words of rebellion, of courage, of dreams. The middle child flips through it, seeing the journey written in ink, from the first question asked at the table, to the first defiance, to the first victory. They realize that their story is not only their own, it belongs to their siblings, to their mother, even to their father. It is the story of a family that lived under silence and learned, piece by piece, to break free. And so the middle child writes the final line of the notebook. Silence may remain, but it will never own us again. They close the book, their hearts steady, because they know the truth now. Silence can be powerful, but voices are stronger. Dad, they say quietly, I don't want to fight you, I just want us to listen to each other. The father stares at them, his face hard, his silence suffocating, but for the first time, he does not dismiss the words outright. He looks away, mutters something under his breath too quiet to catch, but enough to show that maybe, just maybe, the wall is beginning to crumble. The days stretch on, each one carrying both tension and hope. The family is not healed, not yet, but something has shifted permanently. The silence that once defined them is no longer unbreakable. Voices have entered, laughter has slipped through, truth has been spoken. And once truth is spoken, it cannot be buried again. The middle child knows there are still battles ahead, still storms to weather, still nights of fear and mornings of guilt. But they also know something even stronger. The silence has lost its power, and in that knowledge, there is freedom. Lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, they whisper to themselves, we are not trapped forever, we will find a way. The words are small, but they carry the weight of everything that has come before. They are not just a hope, but a promise. And this time, the promise feels real. The house is not the same anymore, though its walls still stand, its roof still shelters, its routines still unfold each day. Something invisible has shifted, something that cannot be undone. Silence still exists, but it no longer holds the same power. It lingers like a ghost instead of a master, a habit instead of a law. The father still sits at the table, still folds his newspaper, still lets his silence speak for him. Yet his silence is different now, weaker, uncertain. The mother still moves through her work, still hums in half-remembered tunes, but her voice is steadier, her eyes more alive. The eldest still carries weight, but sometimes, in moments stolen away from duty, they let themselves laugh without fear. The youngest still plays, still asks questions, still mimics rebellion in small, innocent ways. And the middle child, the one who dared to break silence, walks with a new kind of strength in their step. They are not finished, not free, not unscarred, but they are no longer afraid. One morning, sunlight streams into the kitchen, brighter than usual. The middle child sits with their notebook, scribbling, lost in thought. The mother pours tea, the eldest arranges books, the youngest hums a silly song. The father enters, pauses at the doorway, and for the first time in a long time, he does not command silence. He simply sits. The child glances at him, their pen hovering over the page, waiting for the storm that does not come. Instead, the father clears his throat, the sound rough, uncertain. "What are you writing?" he asks. The room stills. The mother freezes mid-step. The eldest looks up sharply. The youngest stops humming. The child's heart races, but they answer softly, "Dreams." The father says nothing for a long time. His eyes drop to the table, his hands rest on the wood. Then, almost inaudibly, he mutters, "Keep them small." It is not permission, not encouragement, but neither is it a denial. It is the closest he has ever come to admitting that dreams exist at all. The mother exhales quietly. The eldest bows their head, the youngest grins. The child nods, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. They will not keep their dreams small, but they will keep them alive. As days turn to weeks, the cracks in the silence widen. The mother starts telling small stories from her past, not the full truth, not the whole story, but fragments. She speaks of laughter she once had, places she once saw, moments that remind her of who she used to be. The children listen hungrily, piecing together a life that was buried beneath duty. The eldest begins to open too, sharing worries they always carried alone, finally admitting that they are tired. The youngest, fearless in innocence, blurts out wishes at the table. "I want us to laugh more. I want us to eat something different on Sundays. I want us to be happy." The words would have been dangerous once, but now they hang in the air like fragile glass no one dares to break. And slowly, slowly, the father begins to shift. He does not laugh, not yet. He does not tell stories, not yet. But he listens longer. He stares softer. And though his silence remains, it no longer smothers. The middle child continues to write. Their notebook grows thicker, filled with words, drawings, dreams. They write about freedom, about joy, about homes built on love instead of fear. They write about their siblings, their mother, even their father. They write not only what is, but what could be. And with each page, the vision becomes clearer. They may still live within the old house, but inside themselves they are building something new. One evening, when the air outside is soft and the stars shimmer above, the family sits together on the porch. The youngest chatters, the eldest leans back with tired relief, the mother closes her eyes to the night breeze. The father sits silent, but this time his silence feels less like a wall and more like a pause, as though he too is listening to the night. The middle child looks at them all and feels something swell inside. It is not perfect. It may never be perfect. But there is love here, tangled and scarred, stubborn and real. And love, even when flawed, is worth saving. The child knows their journey is only beginning. There will be more arguments, more silences, more battles. The father may never fully change. The mother may always carry her buried sorrow. The eldest may always struggle with duty. The youngest may one day face the same questions. But something irreversible has happened. The silence has been cracked. The truth has been spoken. The possibility of freedom exists now, and it cannot be erased. Years later, they will remember this time, not only for the pain, but for the awakening. They will remember the first question asked at the table, the first defiant words, the first crack in the silence. They will remember the fear, but also the relief of finally being heard, even if only by themselves. They will remember how love survived, not in spite of rebellion, but because of it. And they will carry those memories into their own lives, into the families they build, into the voices they raise. For families are not meant to be prisons. They are meant to be roots and wings, grounding us with love, but also giving us strength to fly. And sometimes, to find that balance, someone has to break the silence first. Someone has to risk anger, risk distance, risk everything in order to make space for truth. In this family, it was the middle child. In another, it might be someone else. But the story is always the same. Silence cannot last forever. Love demands a voice. The story of this house ends not with dramatic escape, not with perfect resolution, but with something quieter, stronger. A spoon clattering on a Sunday, a mother's whispered blessing, a father's reluctant question, a child's steady promise. These small moments build into something larger, something unshakable. The knowledge that change is possible, even here, even now. And that knowledge is enough. Lying awake one last time, staring at the ceiling of the house that has both caged and protected them, the child whispers the words that carried them all this way. We are not